It's me again. It's been a while, but believe me, I've been actually studying a lot of this stuff and the theory behind a lot of this stuff. And today, I want to talk about something I have never actually thought about before in this much depth before I started to actually read about it. It's anti-geometries, and yeah, let's just jump right into it. So anti-geometries are things such as anti-squat, anti-dive, and anti-lift. These are sort of the geometry of the suspension that are acting against some of these forces when you look at from the side of the car. For example, anti-squat is a type of geometry that resists the squatting motion of the car whilst accelerating. Anti-lift, on the other hand, is the force that resists the lift of front or rear end when you're accelerating or decelerating. An anti-dive is pretty much the same as anti-squat, but just for the front. All right, so as I already alluded to, this is about when the car is decelerating or accelerating. There's gonna be a motion from the center of gravity to either end of the car, and these anti-geometries are just angles in the suspension geometry that are acting against that motion. So angling up the arm in the rear or angling up the arm in the front is just fighting against that motion of the car pitching forward or pitching rearwards, and uh, and that's just the core principle of how this all works. All right, so let's get anti-dive and anti-lift out of the way. Our cars pretty much always use kick up in the front, which means that since our suspension is only the lower arm, or pillowball cars have the upper arm, but most of the time they're parallel to the lower arm, it means that no matter what we do, we always will have pro lift and pro dive. Alright, so now to see if you have pro dive or anti dive, you will see the front arm angle. Having the rear of the arm angled upwards will give you anti dive, and having the front of the arm angled upwards will give you pro dive. And this will also give you pro lift or anti lift. It works the same way. Alright, so now that we got the basics and the theory out of the way, let's start talking about what this actually does at the track. When you have anti-squat on a car, this doesn't actually change the force ending up on a tire. So having more or less anti-squat won't put more or less force on the rear tires during acceleration. What it will affect is just the front to back pitch motion of the car, and what you'll gain by doing this is driver feel. So by having the car roll backwards when you accelerate and forwards when you brake, you will have just more feel in the car, and with that feel you can push the car harder and know how the car will react. Alright, so just to clarify, I want to point out that when I'm speaking about changing your anti squat and that producing more motion in the car, I'm talking about changing your anti squat to having less anti squat. So, the easiest way and simplest way to understand this is less anti squat, more movement in the car. More anti squat, less movement in the car. Anti squatting means exactly what it says. The car will resist the squatting motion when you have more anti squat, as in more degrees of angle in the arm. And with less degrees of angle in arm, you will have less anti squat, and that would have more squatting motion produced in the car. Also, on top of the fact that you will have the car roll back to front more, you will also have a slight effect over bumps. So, due to this fact that the car is able to roll more and have uh, the rear end squat on power, when you're accelerating over bumps, having that squatting in the rear will actually help you gain better traction over the bumps, as the rear end is already sort of flowing over the bumps much easier. One good way I've heard of describing this is when you have a very low amount of anti squat, the rear end sort of goes over the bumps like a wet rag. It just flows over them very nicely. And with more anti-squat, you will have the rear end much more stiffer on power, but over these bumps, the rear end will try to kick up much more. However, one thing I've sort of noticed is when you have a lot of high speed bumps. So let's say you have bumps in a huge sweeper, or you're accelerating out of a long corner, you have a lot of speed and there's lots of bumps there. Having more anti-squat actually helps you here, because having the rear end squat down once you're still accelerating will make you hit those bigger bumps much deeper in the bumps. When you have more anti-squat, the rear end will stay more stood up during the acceleration, which means that you will avoid getting that rear end stuck into those bumps going so fast. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So generally, the rule of thumb I use is small bumps, low speed bumps, less anti squat helps you, gives you more feel, gives the rear end sort of that little edge over those bumps, and high speed bumps and really huge bumps. I will use more anti squat. So the important part about this is to remember that anti-squat isn't something you generate more grip with. It's something you generate movement in the car during acceleration. So it's all about the feel you get with the car by reducing or adding anti-squat. Alright, so what does this pro lift and pro dive do for the car? Well, what it actually does is it frees up the front end moving up and down during deceleration and acceleration. Um, this would be adjusted by adjusting your kick up, which is just another way to say that your A arm is in an angle so that it produces a pro dive. So having more kick up would mean you have more pro dive, and that would mean your car will be more free going into the turn. It will be pushing more into the corner, and the front would be moving down much more. So this will give you sort of the feeling that the front end is going down. You have the front end stuck to the corner, and you really feel it. Having less kick up, however, will keep the front end more stiff, sort of. It will keep the front stood up. You will have a bit harder time feeling the front end, and sometimes you might have the car push a little bit more. But in reality, it doesn't really affect the actual grip of the car, just the feeling of grip you will have. So this is pretty much the difference you will have. So more kick up, more pro dive, the car will push down into the corner. Less kick up, less pro dive, meaning you will have the front end more stood up whilst braking and going into the corner. And having more pro dive also means that you will have more pro lift, meaning that whilst you go on power, instead of just the rear squatting, you will also have the front end lift from the ride height. This will end up losing you some grip from the front tires because they are trying to lift off from the ground, meaning that you will not have the forward traction, you will not have the on power steering as much. But already, as I alluded to, having just more pro dive and pro lift in the front just generates that extra movement that gives you more feel in the front. That's why in most scenarios we use actually quite a lot of kick up in the front. And you can especially see this in tool drive 10 scale cars where there's over 25 degrees of kick up. Just because the front end is so light, you will need the front end to have some motion in it. And generally, all these anti-geometries are more beneficial when you have sort of like a Formula One car, where the car is really low to begin with, and you want the ground to stay very stable and not to move around a lot, so you can always have that maximum downforce. On off-road cars, you will always need less anti-squat and, as I said, pro dive and pro lift to have that feel in the car and have that car roll around and move around, so you know what the car is like going through. Alright, so to me this was a very interesting topic. I've been very interested in the feel that reducing anti-squat in the rear produces, and I really enjoyed playing around with it just for the feel of the rear end. So yeah, I hope you understood some of the concepts and how this works, and maybe now you can sort of play around with this yourself. Anyway, until next time. Alright, I hope you liked that video. If indeed I did actually help you out, please let me know by writing a comment down below. Also, if you like my type of content, feel free to like my Facebook page as well as subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also share it with your friends in social media. Now, if you think I was wrong about something in this video, please let me know. I'll go through all the comments, and I'm really open to differing opinions, and I really want to just spark up a conversation. So with all that, until next time.